It is not unheard of in nature for animals to mimic human speech. One might instantly think of parrots as the most well-known imitator of spoken words. What's lesser known is that there have been numerous, thoroughly documented cases of marine mammals learning to mimic human speech in captivity with surprising levels of clarity. The following are 3 known cases of sea mammals that learn to imitate human language. These are but several histories from the 7 seas. Before we get into the main subject of today, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to an earlier age of seafaring, a time of old mariners braving the oceans when they were so little known, and experiencing all the mystery and fascination that comes with such discovery. Imagine their curiosity, their kinship with the sea, the sheer stamina required. These characteristics and so many more can be embodied with Sterkowski's Sailor and Mariner cap collection, offering hats made in the very finest nautical tradition. Within this colorful variety of traditional seafarers' caps, you'll find headwear that is classic yet timeless. And whilst a sailor's cap will instantly give your appearance an oceanic twist, these hats are truly versatile and are just as practical across different environments as they are at sea. Personally, I've enjoyed wearing mine from my native Atlantic coast all the way to the middle of the New Mexico desert, from Rhode Island to Roswell. Just as the sea is a universal shared experience of planet Earth that touches every continent, anyone can wear and enjoy a seafarer's cap, no matter who or where you are. And when I wear my own Sterkowski cap, I feel my appearance is characterized for the better as one with deep love for and kinship with the sea, just like the mariners of old days. You can check out Sterkowski's Mariner cap collection via the link in the description. Thank you very much. Our first story today begins on the coast of northern New England in Coondees Harbour, Maine, 1971, when a local named Scotty Dunning happened upon a tiny, stranded harbor seal pup on the shoreline. Dunning searched for the lone seal pup's mother but couldn't find her at first. After enlisting the help of his brother-in-law, George Swallow, they eventually located the deceased mother seal who had washed up in a rocky area. Taking pity on the orphaned pup, Swallow took the baby seal home with him in an attempt to care for it. At first, this proved challenging as the young animal refused to drink milk. One of Swallow's neighbors recommended he try instead to feed the pup ground-up fish, which instantly yielded much better results, as the little seal eagerly consumed the new meal, sucking it up like a vacuum. Hence, he earned his name, Hoover, after the then popular vacuum cleaner brand. Hoover spent his first days with the swallows being kept in their bathtub. However, the family decided they'd rather keep their new pet in an outdoor spring-fed pond nearby, where George installed a wire fence he dubbed the pup tent. Locals in Coondees Harbour would sometimes witness the sight of George driving through town with Hoover accompanying him, sticking his head out the moving car window, just like a dog. Hoover continued to rapidly grow and needed an ever-increasing amount of fish. The swallows accommodated their beloved pet's appetite by contracting a Portland-based firm to supply an industrial amount of fish. Thus far, the story of Hoover the seal is that of an unconventional pet. But now, we will begin to delve into why we're talking about him over half a century later. The swallows talked to Hoover all the time, with Alice Swallow recounting in her book, Hoover the Seal and George, that if George was late in giving Hoover his breakfast, he found his way up to the back steps. George would yell, "Hello there!" George and Hoover were great friends. Sometimes Hoover would hide, and would not appear until George yelled, "Get out of there and come over here!" Then Hoover would come out of hiding, and rush over to George and greet him with a wet, fishy kiss. It should be noted for later that George had a very thick New England accent and would often repeat the previously mentioned phrases to Hoover. Between Hoover's continued growth and his mammoth appetite for fish, the swallows hesitantly decided that keeping the seal as a pet was not sustainable, and thus they opted to give Hoover to the New England Aquarium located in Boston, Massachusetts. It was at this stage that George revealed to the aquarium that Hoover could talk, although none of their personnel took this claim seriously. And for about the first 5 years of Hoover's time at the aquarium, He seemed a rather ordinary harbor seal, until he began to make noises incredibly similar to human speech, and in what resembled a thick New England accent.
Maybe later I'll switch.
Hey! Get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out!
Hello there.
Hey, get out! 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 Hey, get out!
Hoover is already vocalizing for you there. And I'll tell you a little bit about him. He does have a history here. He came to us in 1971, and he was a stranded animal, and around 1974, he started to make these garbling sounds that didn't make much sense at all. And around 1977, he said Hoover. So we reinforced him by feeding him fish, but we didn't teach him how to do it. He just sort of taught himself. And all of a sudden he said, "Hello there," and he started to add more phrases. And now he says, "Hey, get out of here," in a real Boston accent. So we really can't explain it other than saying that Hoover picked it up on his own, and we reinforced it, but we did not teach him how to do it. I'll see if I can get his attention. Maybe he'll say something. What do you say, Hoover? Above and below the water line, there's Hoover. That's Hoover saying, "Hey, get out of here." Sometimes he's clearer than others.
Hey, get out of here!
Hey!
Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Hey, get out! Get out!
Hoover became locally famous as a talking seal who would routinely draw sizable crowds, keen on experiencing the strange spectacle. Crucial for context is that the aquarium staff never trained Hoover to speak. It was the seal's own unique behavior that seemingly developed as a result of his upbringing with George Swallow. Hoover being around age 5 when he started to speak wasn't a coincidence either. This is around the time a harbor seal reaches sexual maturity, at which point males naturally begin to perform mating vocalizations in efforts to court females. Likewise, it was observed at New England Aquarium that Hoover's speech significantly increased during mating season from May through August and appeared to be directed at the female seals. Hoover would spend the rest of his life at New England Aquarium, where he fathered 6 seal pups, none of whom were ever known to talk as their father did. In July of 1985, Hoover died at about age 14 due to complications in his molting process. The aquarium personnel noted that Hoover had always had a difficult time during his annual molt, and while they did everything they possibly could to help him, it wasn't enough in the end. To this day, Hoover remains one of the most prominent examples of an animal learning to mimic human speech, and while he was certainly a special case, in large part due to his bond with George Swallow, Hoover's story provides strong evidence that pinnipeds, those being seals, sea lions, and walruses, possess advanced vocal capabilities that set them apart from other mammals, even humanity's primate relatives. There is so much left to learn on this topic, but pinnipeds, and especially harbor seals, may be the most capable mammals of mimicking and even learning to understand human speech. Hoover's example will continue to provide a fascinating foundation for any further studies.
Take it off, take it off, take it off. Hey, hey. Take it off, take it off. Take it off, come on. Hello. Take it off, take it off, take it off.
In the handful of reported instances of marine mammals mimicking human speech, one of the more recent cases is that of Wikie, a female orca who lives at the recently closed marine land of Antibes in France, where she was born in 2001. In 2018, Wikie became the subject of significant press when she was reported to have learned how to imitate human speech after being specifically trained to do so.
1, 2. Hello? 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 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Amy. Amy. Amy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
She is thought to be the first recorded orca to have mimicked human speech in this way. The conditions of Wikie's described imitation of human speech were controversial from the start, with animal rights groups sharply criticizing the training of a captive killer whale to repeat trained spoken phrases as inhumane and cruel. This backlash would ultimately trend towards the prevailing mood in France, where a law in 2021 banned shows involving cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, which mandated that all current cetaceans currently held in France be relocated by 2026. Marine land of Antibes closed permanently in December 2024 after one final show with Wikie and her son Kaijo, who was born in 2013. They are the last two remaining captive killer whales in France. Where Wikie and Kaijo will end up is uncertain. Marine land of Antibes came under additional fire for initially seeking to transfer the orcas to an aquarium in Japan with an even smaller concrete tank than the one they currently inhabit in France. A number of activists and prominent ecologists, including the legendary zoologist Dr. Jane Goodall, had called for the two orcas to be transferred to the Whale Sanctuary Project in Nova Scotia, Canada, which would offer a seaside sanctuary environment rather than a concrete aquarium. What's more is that unlike in an aquarium, sanctuary orcas are not required to perform for human amusement whatsoever, and they are not used for breeding, which they are in the zoo industry. The sanctuary applied to take in both whales, but were rejected in January 2025 by the French government, who cited the waters of Nova Scotia as being too cold for orcas that have spent their whole lives in southern France. Meanwhile, Marineland of Antibes continues to care for Wikie and Kaijo and has suggested transferring them to a zoo in Spain, whilst the French ecology minister has alternatively suggested the creation of a new European marine sanctuary altogether. Animal rights groups have continued to criticize the course of Marineland of Antibes, often stating that the transfer of Wikie and Kaijo to another zoo will simply continue the cycle of exploitation of these highly intelligent animals for human amusement and zoo industry profit. It is unclear which of these options, if any, will proceed, and the futures of Wikie and Kaijo hang in the balance. This all comes as France officially celebrates the Year of the Sea in 2025, a government-led campaign meant to highlight the ocean's importance. The Cold War was an era of sometimes highly unusual government experimentation, as was the case for our final subject today. The U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program came about in the 1960s, at first to train animals such as bottlenose dolphins and sea lions to perform military tasks such as mine detection and clearance, as well as equipment recovery. Flash forward to the next decade, by which time the Arctic had become the naval focal point of the Cold War thanks to the significant presence of Soviet submarines in the region. The US Navy sought marine mammals possessing sonar that could be trained to work in the Arctic's unforgiving waters, including deep dive operations. Thus, beluga whales were chosen. In 1977, a US Navy team traveled to the northern coast of Manitoba with the blessing of the Canadian government, where they worked alongside Inuit hunters to capture their desired beluga whales for what would become known as Cold Ops. 6 belugas would be caught during the first phase of Cold Ops from 1977 through 1980, with the youngest being a 2-year-old calf they would name Nosy, spelled N-O-C, named after the biting sandflies known as Nosiums. Then, in 1984, the personnel who worked with Nosy began to hear strange noises. Sam Ridgway, one of the key operatives to work with Nosy, wrote in the 2012 research paper he co-authored, "Spontaneous human speech mimicry by a cetacean that the whale made sounds akin to 2 people conversing, just out of the range of our understanding." The following audio was released with that research paper. From 1984 through the next 4 years, Nosy would produce such noises on a regular basis. One memorable incident occurred when 2 Navy divers performed aquatic repairs in the whale enclosure, where they used a comms device that made their voices clearly audible underwater. The workday went awry when one of the divers, an experienced Navy veteran, rapidly emerged from the water, very confused, asking his colleagues which one of them told him to get out. They reacted with bewilderment. Upon review of the incident, the diver once more recounted that he heard "out, out, out," spoken multiple times, and it was only then that the Cold Ops personnel realized these words had indeed been spoken by Nosy. Michelle Jeffries was on site the day this episode took place, and she recounted how once everyone realized that Nosy was talking, the team reacted with excitement, for, in her words, they felt completely humbled by this amazing animal. Nosy would enter rambling bouts of speech, sometimes up to 30 seconds long, both at the prompts of his trainers, as well as totally random, spontaneous bursts of his own. The Cold Ops personnel did note that Nosy only performed his trademark vocalizations when he was either alone or in the company of humans, and never with his fellow whales. There have been earlier descriptions in history of beluga whales making sounds that are human-like, sometimes earning them the nickname canaries of the sea. However, Nosy's mimicry was the first to be captured in an audio recording and offers an unprecedented amount of information about the capacity of a beluga whale to imitate human speech. Similar to Hoover the seal, Nosy's recorded speech has been studied and was found to exhibit high levels of vocal learning, which is a very advanced cognitive process. Sam Ridgway said of Nosy's speech, "They were definitely unusual sounds for a beluga, and similar to human voices in rhythm and acoustic spectrum." Ridgway wrote further, "We do not claim that our whale was a good mimic compared to such well-known mimics as parrots or myna birds. However, the sonic behavior we observed is an example of vocal learning by the white whale. It seems likely that Nosy's close association with humans played a role in how often he employed his human voice, as well as in its quality." From the time he was captured in 1977, Nosy spent the remainder of his life in captivity until he died in 1999, at which point he was around 24 years old. One last Cold Ops beluga, who lived alongside Nosy for years, would live significantly into the new millennium. Ruby the beluga whale, who was transferred to SeaWorld San Diego in the 90s and spent the rest of her life there until she died in 2014 at age 38. While 38 years is considered a longer than usual lifespan for a captive beluga, their wild counterparts are thought to live between 35 and 50 years on average, with some studies suggesting their natural lifespans may look more like 70 to 80 years. Nosy's story remains an incredibly unique and fascinating case study, not least of all because of the sheer intelligence and learning capacity on display. Like Michelle Jeffries said on the day of the scuba incident, one simply feels humbled by this amazing living being when learning about the life of Nosy. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I certainly hope you enjoyed learning about the stories of these three so very unique marine mammals. Several editorial notes. I personally found Hoover's story heartwarming and endearing due to the seal's relationship with George Swallow, who really did seem to love him, while Wikie's tale left me with a heavier heart. Remember that her and her son's future is an ongoing issue in France. As for Nosy, this is actually the second time he's been covered on the channel. I always felt that the first video that touched on him didn't do his story proper justice, and he's always stood out in my mind as one of the most memorable and fascinating marine life stories I've ever come across in my years running this channel. If you enjoyed this narrated format, please let me know, and if you didn't enjoy it, also please let me know, as that'll factor into how many of these I continue to make, if at all. In any case, the classic text and music videos are never going away. If you liked this video and want more of this format, I can't help but recommend the video I made a couple Halloweens ago covering the Jersey Shore shark attacks of 1916. Personally, it's one of my favorite videos on the channel. That's all for now. Until next time, my seafaring friends.